Alright, hello everybody, welcome to another video today. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be going over the Big Lots closing list as of Saturday, August 3rd, 2024. So it started out with 40 stores, then it went to 140, and now we have a total of 300 Big Lots stores that will be closing. So this is the list of the following Big Lots stores that will be closing. In the state of Alabama, we have the Big Lots store in Troy, Alabama. In the state of Arizona, we have the Big Lots store in Glendale, Arizona, the Big Lots store in Laven, Arizona, two Big Lots stores in Mesa, Arizona, a total of 4 Big Lots stores in Phoenix, Arizona, the Big Lots store in Prescott, Arizona, the Big Lots store in Scottsdale, Arizona, the Big Lots store in Tempe, Arizona, and 4 Big Lots stores in Tucson, Arizona. In the state of Arkansas, we have the Big Lots store in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and in the state of California, we have the two Big Lots stores in Anaheim, California, the Big Lots stores in Ashacadillo, California, the Big Lots stores in Ottawater, California, two Big Lots stores in Bakersfield, California, the Big Lots store in Beaumont, California, the Big Lots store in Camarillo, California, the Big Lots store in Cameron County, California, the Big Lots store in Craze, California, two Big Lots stores in the Big Lots store in Chico, California, the Big Lots store in Sino, California, the Big Lots store in Concord, California, the Big Lots store in Corona, California, the Big Lots store in Culver City, California, the Big Lots store in Delano, California, the Big Lots store in El Cajon, California, the Big Lots store in Elk Grove, California, the Big Lots store in Fairfield, California, the Big Lots store in Folsom, California, the Big Lots store in Fontana, California, the Big Lots store in Freedom, California, 3 Big Lots stores in Fresno, California, the Big Lots store in Gardena, California, the Big Lots store in Gilroy, California, the Big Lots store in Hercules, California, the Big Lots store in Indio, California, the Big Lots store in Englewood, California, the Big Lots store in La Habra, California, the Big Lots store in La Mesa, California, the Big Lots store in Livermore, California, the Big Lots store in Lodi, California, the Big Lots store in Lompoc, California, the Big Lots store in Long Beach, California, the Big Lots store in Los Banos, California, the Big Lots store in Mantesia, California, the Big Lots store in Merced, California, the Big Lots store in Milpitas, California, the Big Lots store in Mission Viejo, California, the Big Lots store in Modesto, California, the Big Lots store in North Highlands, California, the Big Lots store in Oceanside, California, the Big Lots store in Ontario, California, the Big Lots store in Oryville, California, the Big Lots store in Paradise, California, the Big Lots store in Placerville, California, the Big Lots store in Rancho Santa Margarita, California, the Big Lots store in Redlands, California, the Big Lots store in Riverside, California, the Big Lots store in Ron Hurt Park, California, or Ron Ert Park, California, two Big Lots stores in Sacramento, California, the Big Lots store in Salinas, California, the Big Lots store in Santa Bernardino, California, the Big Lots store in Santa Clara, California, the Big Lots store in Santa Maria, California, the Big Lots store in Santa Paula, California, the Big Lots store in San Jose, California, the Big Lots store in Simi Valley, California, the Big Lots store in Spring Valley, California, the Big Lots store in Stockton, California, the Big Lots store in Temecula, California, the Big Lots store in Torrance, California, the Big Lots store in Tracy, California, the Big Lots store in Turlock, California, the Big Lots store in Ukiah, California, the Big Lots store in Vesicalvia, California, the Big Lots store in Victorville, California, the Big Lots store in Visalia, California, the Big Lots store in Whittier, California, the Big Lots store in Woodland, California, the Big Lots store in Yuba City, California, and the Big Lots store in Ukiah Valley, California, or Yucca Valley, California. In the state of Colorado, we have the Big Lots store in Aurora, Colorado, the 3 Big Lots stores in Colorado Springs, Colorado, the Big Lots store in Grand Junction, Colorado, the Big Lots store in Greeley, Colorado, the Big Lots store in Littleton, Colorado, and the Big Lots store in Longmont, Littleton, Colorado, and the Big Lots store in Longmont, Colorado. In the state of Connecticut, we have the Big Lots store in Manchester, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Milford, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Newton, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Norwich, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Torrington, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Waterbury, Connecticut, the Big Lots store in Waterford, Connecticut, then the Big Lots store in Windsor, Connecticut. In the state of Florida, we have the Big Lots store in Boca Raton, Florida, the Big Lots store in Bonita Springs, Florida, the Big Lots store in Boynton Beach, Florida, the Big Lots store in Branton, Florida, the Big Lots store in Clewiston, Florida, the Big Lots store in Coconut Creek, Florida, the Big Lots store in Daytona Beach, Florida, the Big Lots store in Destin, Florida, the Big Lots store in Fort Myers, Florida, the Big Lots store in Hallandale, Florida, the Big Lots store in Hollywood, Florida, the Big Lots store in Miami, Florida, the Big Lots store in Miami Lakes, Florida, the Big Lots store in Naples, Florida, the Big Lots store in Orange Park, Florida, 3 Big Lots stores in Orlando, Florida, the Big Lots store in Plantation, Florida, the Big Lots store in Pompeo Beach, Florida, the Big Lots store in Port Richey, Florida, the Big Lots store in Royal Palm Beach, Florida, the Big Lots store in Sarasota, Florida, the Big Lots store in Stuart, Florida, the Big Lots store in Tempe, Florida, the Big Lots store in Tron Springs, Florida, the Big Lots store in Decatur, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Fayetteville, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Roswell, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Savannah, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Stockbridge, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Stone Mountain, Georgia, the Big Lots store in Thompson, Georgia, and the Big Lots store in Waynesboro, Georgia. In the state of Illinois, we have the Big Lots store in Burbank, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Clement City, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Centralia, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Crest Hill, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Allegan, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Fairview Heights, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Lockport, Illinois, the Big Lots store in Niles, Illinois, and the Big Lots store in Oak Brook Terrace, Illinois. In the state of Indiana, we have the Big Lots store in Elkhart, Indiana, the Big Lots store in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the Big Lots store in Indianapolis, Indiana, the Big Lots store in Caballo, Indiana, and the Big Lots store in Waukesha, Indiana. In the state of Kansas, we have the Big Lots store in Kansas City, Kansas, and the Big Lots store in Salina, Kansas. In the state of Kentucky, we have the Big Lots store in Henderson, Kentucky, the Big Lots store in Lexington, Kentucky, and the Big Lots store in Louisville, Kentucky. In the state of Louisiana, we have the Big Lots store in Bossier City, Louisiana, the Big Lots store in Denham Springs, Louisiana, the Big Lots store in Lafayette, Louisiana, and the Big Lots store in Natchitoches, Louisiana. In the state of Maine, we have the Big Lots store in Portland, Maine. In the state of Maryland, we have the Big Lots store in Bowie, Maryland, the Big Lots store in Glen Burn, Maryland, the Big Lots store in Laurel, Maryland, the Big Lots store in Lexington Park, Maryland, and the Big Lots store in Westertown, Maryland. In the state of Massachusetts, we have the Big Lots store in Ashland, Massachusetts, the Big Lots store in Dennisport, Massachusetts, the Big Lots store in Northampton, Massachusetts, the Big Lots store in Sencock, Massachusetts, and the Big Lots store in West Springfield, Massachusetts. In the state of Michigan, we have the Big Lots store in Big Rapids, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Coldwater, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Holland, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Howell, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Kentwood, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Lansing, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Madison Heights, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Oakhams, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Pedosky, Michigan, the Big Lots store in Portage, Michigan, and the Big Lots store in Yeshapalenti, Michigan. In the state of Minnesota, we have the Big Lots store in Albert Lea, Michigan. In the state of Missouri, we have the Big Lots store in Independence, Missouri, the Big Lots store in Jefferson City, Missouri, the Big Lots store in Kansas City, Missouri, the Big Lots store in St. Joseph, Missouri, and two Big Lots stores in St. Louis, Missouri. In the state of Montana, we have the Big Lots store in Great Falls, Montana, and the Big Lots store in Helena, Montana. In the state of New Hampshire, we have the Big Lots store in St. Claremont, New Hampshire. In the state of Nevada, we have the Big Lots store in North Las Vegas, Nevada. In my home state of New Jersey, we have the Big Lots store in Woodbridge, New Jersey. In the state of New York, we have two Big Lots stores in Buffalo, New York, the Big Lots store in Canandaigua, New York, the Big Lots store in Carl Place, New York, the Big Lots store in Central Reach, New York, the Big Lots store in Ithaca, New York, the Big Lots store in New Hartford, New York, the Big Lots store in Plattsburgh, New York, the Big Lots store in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the Big Lots store in Queensbury, New York. In the state of North Carolina, we have two Big Lots stores in Charlotte, North Carolina, two Big Lots stores in Durham, North Carolina, the Big Lots store in Jefferson, North Carolina, and two Big Lots stores in Raleigh, North Carolina. In the state of Ohio, we have three Big Lots stores in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Big Lots store in Dayton, Ohio, the Big Lots store in Defiance, Ohio, the Big Lots store in St. Mary's, Ohio, the Big Lots store in Sandusky, Ohio, the Big Lots store in Toledo, Ohio, and the Big Lots store in Westchester, Ohio. In the state of Oregon, we have the Big Lots store in Albany, New York, the Big Lots store in Beaverton, Ohio, the Big Lots store in Eugene, Beaverton, Oregon, the Big Lots store in Albany, Oregon, the Big Lots store in Grants Pass, Oregon, the Big Lots store in Gresham, Oregon, the Big Lots store in North Bend, Oregon, the Big Lots store in Portland, Oregon, and the Big Lots store in Northeast Salem. In the state of Pennsylvania, we have the Big Lots store in Clifton Heights, Pennsylvania, the Big Lots store in Carapolis, Pennsylvania, the Big Lots store in Exton, Pennsylvania, the Big Lots store in Kenton Square, Pennsylvania, the Big Lots store in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the Big Lots store in York, Pennsylvania. In the state of South Carolina, we have the Big Lots store in Keene, South Carolina, the Big Lots store in Chester, South Carolina, the Big Lots store in Newberry, South Carolina, and the Big Lots store in Rapid City, South Dakota. In the state of Tennessee, we have the Big Lots store in Franklin, Tennessee, the Big Lots store in Madison, Tennessee, and the Big Lots store in Union City, Tennessee. In the state of Utah, we have the Big Lots store in American Fork, Utah, the Big Lots store in Layton, Utah, the Big Lots store in Logan, Utah, and the Big Lots store in Murray, Utah. In the state of Vermont, we have the Big Lots store in Berlin, Vermont, and the Big Lots store in Rutland, Vermont. In the state of Virginia, we have the Big Lots store in Charlottesville, Virginia, the Big Lots store in Fredericksburg, Virginia, the Big Lots store in Lynchburg, Virginia, the Big Lots store in Manassas, Virginia, the Big Lots store in Norfolk, Virginia, the Big Lots store in North Chesterfield, Virginia, the Big Lots store in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and the Big Lots store in Woodbridge, Virginia. Both of the Woodbridges closing in Virginia and New Jersey, just so happens to be that way. In the state of Washington, we have the Big Lots store in Bellingham, Washington, the Big Lots store in Berrien, Washington, the Big Lots store in Covington, Washington, the Big Lots store in Everett, Washington, the Big Lots store in Kent, Washington, the Big Lots store in Lacey, Washington, the Big Lots store in Lakewood, Washington, the Big Lots store in Linwood, Washington, the Big Lots store in Olympia, Washington, the Big Lots store in Port Angeles, Washington, the Big Lots store in Port Orchard, Washington, the Big Lots store in Puyallup, Washington, the Big Lots store in Renton, Washington, the Big Lots store in Richland, Washington, the Big Lots store in Spokane, Washington, the Big Lots store in Tacoma, Washington, the Big Lots store in Vancouver, Washington, the Big Lots store in Wenatchee, Washington. In the state of Wisconsin, we have the Big Lots store in Delac, Wisconsin, the Big Lots store in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the Big Lots store in Marine Falls, Wisconsin, the Big Lots store in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, the Big Lots store in E, Wisconsin, the Big Lots store in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and the Big Lots store in West Bend, Wisconsin. And these are all of the Big Lots stores that are going to be closing as of Saturday, August 3rd, 2024. So I will provide this link to you guys in the description below for you guys to read this list. I want to sincerely thank you guys for watching, and that will be it.